In the house is Mark Mills, senior fellow, Manhattan Institute, Forbes columnist, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If anybody knows more about energy, then we can't find him. He's nowhere in this area. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning. Thanks for having me here.
Thank you. Looking forward to understand that you're going to be speaking at 11:30, and it's going to be a packed crowd there. So let's do a little warm up. I want to play this first. We got the whole next half hour, but I think you'll enjoy this. Gary Owen is one of the top comedians in the United States of America, and you'll see his picture on the C Spire line on TV, I should say. But the reason I want to play this is because I don't know how we got wrangled into this, and it's been in the fabric of America now, causing pain for a lot of people. But his experience here.
We got a rental at Avis, and we got in the car and already pulled out before we realized, oh, this is electric. And at this point, I was like, we got to get to Palm Springs. It's a 2.5-hour drive with traffic at that point. I was like, we just got to get there. I drove an electric car for a long length of time. It's a nightmare. So we get in it, and all of a sudden we're like 30 minutes from the casino, the Morongo Casino, right outside of Palm Springs, and the light comes on, 15% battery. We find a mall. I said, well, we'll just get something to eat. So we charge it. It's not a supercharger. It's a regular charger. You got to find it. We charge it. We eat. About 45 minutes we was there. We get back in the car. It was like 10% more. It was like a 25%. I said, what? It said 11 hours to fully charge the car.
Jeez.
So then we get in it. We end up making it to the casino. They charged it all night. We get in it to go to Phoenix the next morning. And my GPS said it was almost 4 hours exactly from the Morongo Casino to my hotel in Phoenix. And that 4 hours turned into 6.5.
Jeez.
Because we kept having to stop and charge the freaking car. You just got to sit there, too. You got to hope there's a coffee shop or a gas station or restaurant nearby. And the bad part is the last charge, we was like 10, 15 miles from the football stadium in Arizona. That's why we went to Phoenix to go see a game. Yeah. And it was like we couldn't make it. We had to stop and just charge and get it up to like 20, 30% so we could get there and make the game. And then after the game, we're going out to eat. We only got like 30 miles till we're dead on empty battery. We went to the steakhouse to get something to eat. We had to park at a mall and catch an Uber to the steakhouse. It was just a nightmare. The electric car was just a nightmare. Avis stopped renting those for long road trips. I'd rather just stop and get gas. I still have to pay, like, the superchargers, they still take your credit card, and you got to pay money to charge your car.
Duh.
If I'm going to pay, I want to go. So that was a nightmare, the whole electric car thing.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Well,
amazing.
He's living the reality.
How in the world did we get here, though? But it's almost like the President of the United States of America has pulled one of the greatest scams in American history on the American people, and wants to keep doing it with everything from our dishwasher to our hot water heater.
Well, there's a return of kind of a national obsession with energy. I mean, this is kind of ironic. It's exactly 50 years ago this month that this obsession began. That was with the Yom Kippur War, as you know, when the Arab nations invaded Israel. And that's triggered the oil embargo of the end of that year and into 74, and the belief that we were running out of energy. Excuse me. And the idea we're running out of energy, running out of oil in particular, spawned 50 years of effectless government policies to not find more oil, but to avoid using it. And, of course, the world uses lots more. We have a different dynamic in place now. We think we're using too much oil. That's sort of the psychology, as you know, of the market. Mm-hmm. Because if you burn oil, you create carbon dioxide, and everybody knows what that's supposed to mean. And so we have the same energy policies to avoid using oil again. But meanwhile, I'll just throw one factoid out relevant to the comedian. 95% of the world's transportation of goods and people is fueled by oil today, after hundreds of billions, in fact, trillions of dollars being spent in the pursuit of alternatives to oil. That's what makes the world move. It's what makes commerce work. It's what makes economies and civilizations function. And it will, in the physics and economics of energy, it will for the next half century too. No matter what the policies are or how much money is thrown at it, that's where we are. For the very simple reason that oil is, If it didn't exist, we'd invent it because it lets you do something our friend the comedian pointed out. There's no electric vehicle charging system that exists at any price that can match going to a fuel pump and filling up your gas tank in 3 minutes, which is what it takes to fill up a typical car. It's just a miraculous transfer of energy.
It's almost like if we had started out with vehicles and had no gas stations anywhere, but we got the vehicles and even combustion. But does in moments of silence, and this has been your life as far as energy is concerned, in moments of silence, do you wonder how we got this far, where it's integrated itself into the American fabric without the substructure there? Another situation where when you let the marketplace take care of it, it will progress in a reasonable way. When government gets involved, you're screwed.
Yeah, I think the why question is fascinating because there's no trivial, simple answer. I would say one answer is the story is good. People like stories. We're human. Stories, the story that somehow the transition, quote unquote, from the old stuff, fossil fuels, oil, gas, and coal, to the new stuff, wind and solar, is inevitable. It's a trend from the old combustion engine that's complicated to the new simple electric vehicle that's simple and cheaper. It's a story that sounds seductive. It's not true. It's not a true story. In fact, the idea that going from a combustion engine to a battery-powered car is like going from a horse and buggy to a car, which has been the analogy used over and over again. Yeah. Well, let's think about that analogy. When the internal combustion engine was invented, a car was really different than a horse. I mean, in so many ways, it's so obvious. Governments did not have to subsidize cars. They didn't have to ban horses on roads. In fact, no governments banned the use of horses ever. You could still use a horse on a road in almost every state and county if you get a little permit, like a permit to drive. There were no bans on horses and buggies. There was no bans on buggy whips. It was a natural transition because it was just better. Everybody knew it was better, more convenient, more comfortable, safer than riding riding horses. The death rate from riding horses was, and per passenger mile basis, was off the charts high compared to what we would tolerate today. So this is a narrative, it's a story, and it's all anchored, obviously, in the idea that, we'll stick with cars, that if you drive an electric car, you're cutting carbon dioxide emissions. If you look at the facts, if you drive an EV, you're charging it somewhere, even as inconvenient as it is, depends where you live, what you're fueling it with. If you live, and it not just depend on where you live. It depends on exactly when you charge the vehicle. If you live in some states, you charge it at night. You have a coal-fired car. If you live in California, you charge it at sunny day. It is solar-powered, the car. So you just don't know. We're just guessing how much CO2 emissions will be reduced by driving it. And not to beat this dead horse, so to speak, but what is not being counted are the emissions and energy and environmental costs associated with manufacturing the vehicle in the first place. This is the dirty little secret of EVs. The batteries weigh half a ton. It takes 250 tons of digging of the earth to get the materials to make one battery. That all involves oil-burning machinery somewhere on the planet which emits CO2 and can emit as much CO2 as you think you're saving over the life of the vehicle by not driving an internal combustion engine.
Yeah, but Mark, doesn't China just come out? I said earlier, this guy, Joe Biden, has been probably one of the best presidents ever for China, not here.
Oh, you're right. Exactly.
Yeah, he really has. I mean, in every equation here, from saying, okay, get your governor of California to cut this out in a few years, and you can't even buy a combustion engine, and that's spreading to Illinois and other places like this. All of the things that have happened have ingratiated China and skilled us. But go back to, you and I have been on the planet for a while. The buttons
speak
during
for yourself.
Ford,
Go ahead.
the 55 mile an hour on the interstates.
Yeah.
I don't know if you'll remember that.
Oh, yeah.
What did that cost just to change every freaking sign? And just think about that on interstates. It was ungodly, and it was a failure. It was as much of a failure as these toilets where you got to flush them 3 times.
Well, there's only been a couple times in American history where governments have moved to ban something that people like to do. One of them is the 55 mile an hour speed limit, where basically the government is banning your ability to preserve the most precious commodity in the universe, your personal time, right? You were banning your ability to drive 65 or 70, and it was a feckless law. It saved no energy of any significance and also saved no lives, which was the fallback claim. The other thing that governments did, and this is a warning.
Can you hold that, because we have a break coming up here? I'll just, to go out here, I'll say this. I thank God that we didn't have prohibition and the 55 at the same time.
We'll
talk
go.
more about that coming up next.
You stole my thunder. That's where I was going.
Return to Mark Mills, Senior Fellow at Manhattan Institute, also the author of multiple books. What was your last book, Mark?
It's called The Cloud Revolution, with the subtitle that ends The Roaring 2020. So I'm still a stubborn optimist that we'll politically survive and return to massive economic growth in America.
Well, if Trump gets in, there was a story, and I played a soundbite a little bit earlier. Former President Trump, to the auto workers, he promised to repeal the Biden administration's regulations to promote the introduction of the electric vehicles, et cetera, et cetera. And to the point of he telling the auto workers, if you continue on this path, you're going to be out of business. Well, you're going to be out of business. And I wonder how much of that's resonated with some of them.
Well, I think it has. I mean, first, everyone knows that it's not just the mandates. I mean, 12 states have said they're going to ban your ability to buy a new internal combustion engine car, a regular vehicle, within the next decade. And the EPA wants to do the same thing. So the adage that they're coming to take your car, it's not hyperbole. They're coming to take your car, or your right to buy a new car of the kind that you'd prefer. Look, the myth that EVs take less labor is a myth. It takes less American labor, to your point earlier. It increases the labor overseas, especially in China. China's market share in the refining and production of key materials to make these massive half-ton batteries for EVs, their market share in that is greater than OPEC's market share in oil. More than half, as much as 80% of the refining and production of key materials to make electric car batteries in China. So on this invective, if you like, that this benefits China, it's not an invective. It's true. That's what we're doing. And China, meanwhile, is making those materials because they're energy intensive to manufacture in the first place on the world's biggest coal-fired grid. And they're expanding their coal fleet as we speak by about one new coal power plant every week. So while we're
every week,
so
jeez,
let's put an irony here. We're going to spend trillions, not billions. So Goldman Sachs and a consultancy called Wood Mackenzie costed out the Inflation Reduction Act, which of course is an Orwellian Inflation Creation Act, but they costed it out. It's not $600 billion. It's nearly $3 trillion of spending over the coming decade, and a lot of it's to buy Chinese materials and goods to make EVs and solar arrays. You know, China's 90% of the production of the key silicon to make solar panels. So this is a wealth transfer of epic proportions from American taxpayers to the Chinese industry. It's an increase in our dependency. People talk about energy independence. This is increasing energy dependencies and increasing costs, and all in service of cutting carbon dioxide emissions. So here's a simple fact that comes from this administration's own data. The claimed reductions in carbon dioxide emissions from the Inflation Reduction Act are entirely wiped out by a few years of increased CO2 emissions by China alone, never mind India and Pakistan and South and Africa. So we're going to spend trillions of dollars to make trivial reductions in our carbon dioxide emissions while the world's economies, especially China's, expand to sell us the goods in which they build by burning coal. That's the simple fact of what's going on.
At the same time, you have Al Gore and John Kerry preaching to Americans about how we're not doing our task. Gareth Joyce, I'm not sure if you're familiar with this name, Gareth, I think it's Gareth Joyce, CEO, board member of the California-based electric bus maker, which was called Proterra.
Yeah.
Proterra went belly up.
Yeah.
And he continues to serve as a top advisor to Biden on trade policies and all things electric. It's just crazy.
Well, he knows something about trading with China because the materials you build the giant batteries for electric buses mostly come from China. So I guess you could say he has domain knowledge. Look, I'll say I think there's going to be lots more electric vehicles in the world, especially in America. If you've left the market alone, there's, for some people, for the second or third car, despite what the comedian said, obviously for long distance driving, EVs are a problem. For local use, they have a lot of benefits. People like them. A lot of rich Americans. This is great. Let the market figure out how many there will be. If I were guessing, in a free market, maybe there's 10 times more EVs in America, which would mean they supply 10 to 15% of transportation. So whatever, it's not going to change the world.
Where applicable, use it. Diesel to gas.
Exactly.
And let it do that way. Being a country boy here, I just sometimes things go over my head. And I don't understand how we bypass the hybrid situation. To me, that would have been the logical step as far as technology and everything else. And now it seems like they're backtracking a little bit and going back to, okay, hybrid might be a good idea. But it would be a good idea for the automobile industry as well as for the American consumers. What happened there?
Well, you're obviously, you should run an automotive company. You should be the CEO of.
They'd fire me.
Well, here's in the news in the last 24 hours. We find that the Ford and GM are noting that EV sales the rate of increase is slowing, that the inventory is building up, but what's accelerating are hybrid sales, to your point. So what consumers who can afford it, again, remember hybrid vehicles like EVs in general are more expensive than the least expensive option. So you have sort of two markets for cars. Well, roughly speaking, the luxury car market, which is about 10 or 15% of the market, and everybody else. In the luxury car market, 70% of new cars sold in the luxury car market are electric vehicles, most of which are Teslas. It's a great Tesla story, good on Elon Musk. But to your point, if you want to save gasoline at the least expensive way and the highest convenience way possible, it's a hybrid. You're absolutely right. And the plug-in hybrid, which is what Toyota was promoting before they got spanked by the forces of the transition. A plug-in hybrid is a vehicle, as you know, that I can get 20, 30, 40 miles of driving on battery only with a battery that's 1/10 the size and weight and cost of an all EV. So for around town driving, a lot of people don't drive more than a few miles for an errand. Great. But you hit the highway, you've got a gas tank too. So you can go 400 miles to your destination and refuel in 4 minutes instead of 40 minutes or 40 days, depending.
Wasn't one of the greatest things on that went viral was this EV that had a Honda generator in the back, and needed some gas. That was one of the greatest pictures.
Well, what they're epitomizing is, and I hate to redound to physics and chemistry because all of us choose to forget what we learned in high school, but the energy density of oil of gasoline is 5,000% higher than the energy density of lithiated chemicals that make up lithium battery. So if you want to store energy in the smallest volume and weight possible, it's literally impossible to beat oil. It's crazy. It's just the way it is. So that's why you see generators on trailers recharging. I'll say it again. It's not that there aren't going to be more EVs than there shouldn't be. Options for people to buy as many as they want. Subsidizing EVs, we know for a fact, is taking money from the middle class taxpayers to give to the wealthy. That's immoral and nutty. It just is. So why are we doing that? If you want to save oil, you want to cut fuel consumption, we should take those subsidies, if we're going to do subsidies at all, and give them to what are called super users. These are the people that drive older vehicles, pickup trucks, that mow lawns, work at building infrastructure. They're the ones that drive long distances. They're the ones that can't afford the most efficient internal combustion engine because it costs more. It's a new vehicle. Subsidize them. True. I mean, it'd be a more moral approach to cutting oil use. Let's just do that.
Well, as Trump said, the current president is turning us into Cuba with some of these old vehicles. So, but
exactly.
As a matter of fact, what you were just speaking in one of the stacks here, new survey just released over the weekend. Most Americans will not be buying an EV for their next purchase. Right. Only 31% said they're likely the next time they purchase a vehicle. Only 31% said they would consider an EV. So it's not happening. You can force it all you want to, but it's not happening.
Well, they'll consider it until they show up and look at the sticker, even with the discounts, and until they figure out it's not the range anxiety here. Let's be clear about something. It's a misnomer. It's not that an EV will go about as far as a average gasoline-powered car per fill-up. The problem is how long it takes to fill it up. If you time it yourself, I've done this. See how long it takes you when you pull up to a gas pump. 3 minutes, 4 minutes? The superchargers that are being touted, and Elon Musk makes a bunch of them, that do super fast take 30 to 40 minutes. That's super fast. Not overnight, but 40 minutes is a lot longer than 4 minutes in my book.
We have a final segment coming up here, and I got to ask you about this one because there's another thing here that nobody's talking about. But sooner or later, with success, we got a problem. Well, with that success, if we do get 50, 60, even 30 to 40% of the population driving on the roads, is how do we do the equivalency of a gasoline tax? Yeah. And that's got to come. Speak to that when we come.
That is so good.
Does that bring back memories?
Oh, yeah. I was a kid. I worked in the Reagan White House Science Office as a mere child. What a great experience. I never met the man because they didn't, it was an adult White House. They didn't let kids hang out in the Oval Office, but it was a life-changing experience in so many ways.
He was an amazing guy.
Yeah.
What are we going to do as far as taxes? Because sooner or later, we're going to have a come-to-Jesus meeting about that.
Yeah, they're coming after you on that one. And it's worse than you think. So all the road taxes that are not levied on electric vehicle drivers, of course, that'll come to a screeching halt the second there's enough EVs to make a bite out of those revenues. So they'll either do a mileage charge, just charge you how many miles you drive. So they'll track your car and keep track of it, or they'll assess it at the end of a annual inspections. But you will be taxed for road use. It doesn't matter whether you have a gerbil-powered, battery-powered, or gasoline-powered vehicle. They'll come for the money.
It's got to be commensurate with it. Well, the feds are, 18 cents? 18 and a half. And our states also 18 and a half.
Well, the Howie Fund, they collect it when you buy gasoline. They're not collecting when you buy electricity. They'll just shift the tax over to. They'll know the government can know through technology that you're using electricity to drive a vehicle. That's what the charger will report, and you'll be charged the tax when you charge your vehicle up. That's what will happen. However, is it'll be worse than you think, because if the goal is to cut CO2 emissions, to come back to that, what the EV advocates are talking about doing is not making it possible for you to charge your vehicle, fuel it at all. If you fuel it at a time that's not convenient to the government, or put differently, they'll provide, quote unquote, air quotes, incentives to convince you to only refuel your vehicle at an appropriate time. Put differently, that means that they'll punish you financially, tax you, if you refuel your vehicle when you're using power plants they don't like, burning gas or coal. And on top of that, the infrastructure to fuel your vehicle costs 10 times, not a little more, 10 times more in capital terms than the infrastructure to fuel a gasoline car. Most people, when they see these chargers, think of a plug, just plug it in, I'm fine. The fast chargers, which you'll need on the road to refuel, per the comedian, they cost 10 times, not 10%, 10 times more per fueling port than a gasoline pump. So a gasoline station, when they build it, they spend about $20,000 to buy that pump to put gasoline in your car.
Crazy.
A supercharger costs $200,000 to service the same vehicle. So we're going to have to build hundreds of thousands of those, put differently, hundreds of billions of dollars worth of superchargers. Somebody's going to pay for that. And you know who that's going to be, because in the end, there's only one person. You, the fuel user, or you, the taxpayer, or both.
Somewhere down, and then we also have to talk about where we're going to put these batteries and all of that. And I'm not really even sure what the used EV market looks like out there.
Yeah.
Is anybody buying a used EV? If you bought a used EV in Alaska, where it gets down to 40 degrees below zero, and they have some hills and mountains there, you might as well get a go-kart.
Yeah, I think that you put your finger on two big issues. One, which, truth be told, people don't really care about. By people, I mean environmentalists who used to care about waste. We're going to have millions of batteries that are worthless a decade from now. They'll go in landfill. The truth is, they'll recycle the copper and the aluminum, of course, but the rest is trash. the used car value of an EV is the nub of the economics. You absolutely nailed it. If the batteries get better, which they will, technology gets better all the time, and the single most expensive part of that car is a technology that'll be old and out of date when you're ready to sell it, whether it's you bought it or you leased it. The used car value market will collapse for those. It already is. So what's going to happen? Well, I guess if you own the vehicle, you're going to be unpleasantly surprised. If you're the leaseholder, you're going to end up upside down in terms of the economics of what you just financed. To put it very simplistically, the leaseholders of the vehicles may find themselves facing bankruptcy as millions of vehicles come off lease that can't be resold.
Number one, if you look at it, we're almost out of the market now. Middle class America it's almost too. You can't buy a new car anymore. It's almost outrageous for that. So we're already there. You're going to be speaking at 11:30 this morning. Basically the same thing we talked about here, but I'm sure you're going to get into more great detail on
it. I'll get slightly more techie, but try not to do too much of that. We'll be wider awake by then.
I have enjoyed it immensely. Thanks for taking the time to come by. I appreciate it very much, sir.
Thanks for
having
me.
Mark Mills. Mark is going to be at the, where did I say, River Hills Country Club in Jackson, where they serve some pretty good food, too. Don't bypass that.
I'm looking forward to it.
And none of it's fattening, by the way, just to let you know.
Thank goodness.